Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Slither from 2006. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And Slither was selected by Sinram. So this was the first film written and directed by James Gunn. James Gunn had been around for a while at that point, I believe about over 10 years. He helped write, his first writing credit was Romeo and Juliet. Of course, worked on the Scooby-Doo live action movies and other stuff, but this is the first one that he wrote and directed. And I think it's probably more notable now because of that, primarily, but also as a horror, outer space aliens come. What would it be called? I keep saying it has so many. It's like science fiction, black comedy horror thing. It is a super hyphenate kind of category genre thing. It's basically like horror comedy, but it is about like these little worm things that come sort of take over Michael Rooker. He then strikes, infecting the town. Everyone gets taken over by these little weird slug things. It is a lot of fun, and I generally actually really enjoy this film quite a bit. It's not, I would say, like what you expect from a James Gunn movie now. I feel like that's very solidified post Guardians. What's interesting about this is this was pretty much hailed right when it came out. It totally bombed, but it had generally good reviews. I always heard good things about it. I actually did not see it until I am doing this now. I just watched it, but I had heard about it and I heard some buzz on it. It seemed kind of gross and weird. It is gross and weird. I'm not a big gross horror person. I like horror. Gross horror is like, sometimes I draw the line. But this movie, one of the things about it, and I think maybe James Gunn as well, is I've heard other people say, like, he worked for Trump, he worked for this gross, transgressive kind of art ideas, and he was more into shock humor and things like that. I don't look at this as much with shock humor as, like, I think you can tell this is a guy who understands how to use his gifts as an artist and a writer and a director and get that to work throughout the film, and he's not overwhelming you with his auteur bullshit. Maybe he does that later in his filmography, but he doesn't do that now. He's very well tempered, especially for a first time director, which is pretty amazing actually, because that's usually not something you get for first time directors. I would say it's endearing in its humor, in how it messes around with the plot, how it's a lot more engaging in terms of, like, you never really know who's going to get murdered, what's going to happen with these slug things. Like, he has so many turns and twists throughout this thing that I actually genuinely liked as a viewer, that even though I was sometimes grossed out and it isn't the kind of horror that I'm specifically like more akin to or whatever, I still like enjoyed watching it. Like, all the gross stuff, even though it's like super fucking gross at the end, I was so into it, I wanted to watch it. Like, I was ignoring that part of my brain that was like dude, this is disgusting. He was very well tempered on it. This is someone who understood he wanted to make a solid film. Like, I think a lot of times with this kind of a movie in this era, you didn't get that. It seemed like the press and most people were down for this. It just didn't sort of work out, but they weren't selling it as this is a new cult movie. They were sort of looking at this in horror at the time, which was tons of remakes, torture porn, stuff like that. Like, what if we try something different? Which in fact makes this a genuine cult film. Like, genuinely cult stuff is more like, oh, I wanted to be mainstream, I wanted to try something different artistically, but my ideas were so bizarre and weird it didn't work. But like, you as a viewer who sees lots of movies sees that and goes, oh my god, what the fuck. And that generally, I think the thing about James Gunn is, we talk about how he came from Trauma. He was this different, weirder kind of filmmaker to becoming a big studio director. He did write Romeo and Juliet. He did work with Lloyd Kaufman a lot. And this is like his undoubtedly cult movie bona fides right here. This is like, he made a cult horror movie. This is not, no superheroes are in this shit. And also, I think the cast is generally really great. You have a great, for a cult audience, also Nathan Fillion, who is years after Firefly. He obviously is going, I mean, this is, to me, this is pretty much one of those Comic-Con movies. I couldn't read of much Comic-Con promotion. Maybe there was and I missed that article, but this feels like it would appeal to that crowd, but in a way that, like, I don't think it overdoes it. It feels like he cast this kind of lovingly. Like, Michael Rooker is great as a slug guy in this. Nathan Fillion, I think, is a great lead. I almost wish he could be cornier and hammier, but like his performance, his cynical kind of performance in this, I think works with the James Gunn thing. I haven't seen Nathan Fillion be the lead in that many movies, actually, now that I think about it. I do like him. It was also interesting seeing Elizabeth Banks before she kind of blew up a bunch of years later. You know, it is interesting seeing so many people in this who would become, you know, bigger and have further careers post this, and it being a James Gunn thing. It's like seeing like a window into what's going to happen in the future to a certain regard. I do like the idea that this film changes sort of genres. It is, you know, an alien invasion, the Blob type of movie through and through. That doesn't really change, but it starts off as that, like an invasion into body snatchers. Then it becomes, you could say it goes into body horror. You could also say it becomes, and I know people say that about a lot of movies, but this honestly just becomes a zombie movie at a certain point. Now, James Gunn had also written the Dawn of the Dead remake, and you can tell this is someone who understands the zombie genre, but understands horror genre in a way like lovingly, like he's twisting it and turning it, which is what I like about genre directors. I like when they understand the various rules to genre and they want to fuck with it, and that's what I got with this and Slither. This also is an appearance by Jenna Fisher, who was his wife at the time. This is like before The Office was a thing. I'm not sure. Didn't they make that season the pilot? And then anyway, it wasn't as much of a thing at the time, so that's another one. They were married then they got divorced before Super, I think. Anyway, I don't want to comment on their relationship, but they were married at one time, and apparently they're still friends, but yeah, I like her little bits in this, but it is kind of like, in every review they mention her, and I'm like, I mean, you know, there's other people who were, Greg Henry did a lot more, and you know, I don't see a lot of Greg Henry. Where's the Greg Henry stance talking about Slither? Wait, who was that actually? Oh, I actually feel bad now. I quite liked him, and I did like him. Greg Henry was actually good. Now I feel like an asshole. Okay, Greg Henry was great. Remember he was in Gilmore Girls and stuff, but like he was actually, I really liked him in this. And then he was the grandfather in Guardians or something. Anyway, Slither does also, I think, contain its weirdness in a lot of ways, which is another thing I was surprised. Like, this sort of reminded me of Dead Alive, and I think in that film and in Evil Dead and stuff, it feels like anything could happen. I do remember one of the things with this as well is I remember in the theater there's a thing where like, and I've seen it used at other like kid museums and stuff, where you can if you step on this thing, all these like little slugs would come and get you and stuff. And I remember going to the theater for something else because I didn't see this in the theater, and that little theater thing in Lowe's Kips Bay at the time. If anyone remembers that, comment below your Slither theater experience. Yeah, I do think this shows a lot of promise. I don't get the impression that this was a director who's making a calling card kind of movie, which definitely happens. I think he really was trying to make the best Slither that Slither could be. He was like someone who loves horror movies and loves cinema and loves trying to mess with all these things, but also like he has like this weird kind of odd sense of humor, sort of playing down everything. I don't think in some ways like Shaun of the Dead, which I've heard this one compared to, calls to mind a lot of that stuff. Like I know a lot of people who watch that movie who've never seen a George Romero movie or seen it once, or like they're not going to get the references and go like, oh cool and stuff. Slither is not that kind of movie. Slither is for the people who would make Shaun of the Dead. Slither is not for the people who are fans of Shaun of the Dead who don't watch horror movies. It's for people who watch horror movies. And I think Gunn was almost too inside in that, which is interesting because it feels like he got his taste to become, through his likability and understanding how to meld genres, more palpable for people. He got them more digestible. Like he has this funny kind of soundtrack in it, and it doesn't feel so kind of weird and obtuse and stuff, which is kind of a skill. When you watch this, it feels like he doesn't really even give a shit. He's like, I'm making the best Slither can be. Maybe he learned that lesson from this, but at the same time, like I want Slither to be this. Like it's like, fuck everybody listening to the Guardian soundtrack. I want to watch this gross, like, you know, alien slug movie where it's going in everyone's mouths and like all the sci-fi elements, and Michael Rooker giving a great performance and everything. It's also like I think this is Michael Rooker's, like, I like how he has used that actor. Like that is fucking great. I have to say, much better than Kevin Smith did. This I was definitely happy I got to see this. This is definitely like a good movie to have seen in the movie review vote, because I had never seen it before. I actually haven't seen Super either. I do like James Gunn as a director. This has kind of made me like him even more. I like how he basically like purposefully made kind of a horror movie that understood when to change genres and felt totally appropriate. There are certain points I wondered, like, is everybody gonna die and this movie will switch kind of its perspective, which it actually does do. So it actually put me on edge. There's not a lot of horror movies that I'm like, oh, and this person's gonna live and that person's not. I honestly was like, could everyone die? I mean, I guess technically, but not in the movie. Like, but I actually did think, like, who's gonna make it out of this? Like, it actually, like, gave me fear. Like, it's someone who understood, like, it's more fun as an audience to think like that everyone's gonna get murdered by slugs. That's the film school thing they teach you. The only thing I guess I didn't like is the McMansion kind of houses in it. I was like, oh god, those houses are fucking ugly. But I guess it's trying to be everyday America, and that's everyday America now. So cool. They're just so awful looking. I don't like those fucking things. It didn't look good. But I get that it's trying to do everyday America. So, but they did look like real houses. It looked like they like rented someone's house. They didn't shoot it on a soundstage. I appreciate that. Also, for what this movie looks like probably like a $60 million film, and I think they shot it for like 20 to 30, so that's pretty impressive as well. If you've never seen Slither and you like James Gunn, I highly recommend it. If you like horror or zombie films, or like, you know, bugs coming from outer space to fuck up humanity kind of films, this is a great film to check out. You know, I generally was happy that I finally saw this. I think this is an interesting oversight in my film watching that I'm glad I kind of filled there, and I think definitely like a worthy entry into kind of that genre, like one that I can be like proudly say I think should be up there with the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the first two versions, the Blob, and things like that. I think this is the best version we've gotten in recent memory. I can't think of another one, and I really do think it works with kind of the darker kind of shock humor. That's the other thing, is like I always hear about how he's more into shock humor and stuff. This, it felt like naturally worked within what the story was. Like, I think most shock humor pops out and kind of surprises you. This, like, it has darker elements, but I kind of accepted that as the world of this film and didn't look at it as like wholly inappropriate or anything like that, which I think calls to mind a lot about James Gunn as a director, that he was able to do that, especially this early on in his filmography. I think this definitely shows you the promise of him, and also the promise that a slug will come in and control you and make you into a zombie thing and stuff. But this is a very entertaining, slimy, slithery film that's infected my brain, and I'm going to probably tell more people to check out if they're into James Gunn. I think it is, and this kind of genre, I think it is probably a little more essential than even it gets credit for now. It might be a cult film, but I can honestly see the more people checking this out throughout the years, the more we're probably going to hear about it, as it infects us all like the virus it is and eats away at humanity till there's probably nothing left. So if you've seen Slither and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month.